Good day, and welcome to the Consulting Specifying Engineer webcast, Division 25 Specification, live software demonstration for integrated systems, sponsored by Schneider Electric. I'm your moderator, Kevin Parker, here on behalf of Consulting Specifying Engineer and CFE Media and Technology. Here are some tips to help you get the most from today's webcast. If you're experiencing issues with the slides or audio, refresh your browser or click the Refresh Media button directly under the presenter's picture. You can control the volume of this webcast by adjusting the volume on your computer or by adjusting the volume on the platform. If you are having technical problems with audio or the slide presentation, click on the question mark at the top right-hand corner of your screen to access a list of system checks to try before contacting an online technician. If you do need a technician, type a message in the Ask a Question box, and someone will get to you as quickly as possible. Individual technical questions will be answered in the Answered Questions box. You can also type questions for our speaker in the Ask a Question box. The live Q&A session will begin after the presentation concludes. Today's webcast is being recorded. You will receive an email within a week with a link to the on-demand event. To download a certificate of completion or a PDF copy of the presentation, use the Event Resources tab on the left-hand side of your screen. These documents will also be available with the on-demand version of this webcast. Now I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Brad Bonfiglio. Brad is currently the Consultant Solution Architect Director for Schneider Electric, managing a national team that provides solution architecture support for EcoStruxure building solutions. Brad brings over 20 years of experience in the building management, solutions, security, and energy management industry, and holds a Bachelor of Science of Industrial Engineering from the University of Florida and an MBA from the University of Dallas. He joined Schneider Electric in 2007 as the Southwest Director and as a Certified Energy Manager. Thank you for joining us today, Brad, and please go ahead.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on what part of the country you're in. And I do have to put out, since I am in Dallas, at least our Cowboys won for once. So I'm going to put a plug out for the Cowboys if there's any Cowboy fan out there. So anyway, I wanted to go through. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for Consultant Specifying Engineering magazine for hosting us. This is really a second part series in a two-part session. The other one was done this summer as an introduction to what is Division 25. And I'm going to give, through the agenda here, I'm going to give a little bit of recap that the folks that haven't been on there of who in the world is Schneider Electric. A recap of really just briefly of what is Division 25, what does a smart building look like. And then part two is really just getting into a live demonstration. This is always a tricky subject to do when you're going to do a live. I'm literally going to go into the internet and connect to our system that connects our buildings to give you that representation of what is possible, and then kind of sum it up in a conclusion before we're done. Now, the first time we hosted this session, we had 46 questions at the end. So obviously, if we have that many this time, we're not going to be able to answer them all. But I'll do my best, and then if the ones I can't answer are going to take too long to answer over the air here in the time we have, then I'm going to go ahead and answer those offline and get them back to CSE magazine here. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. I will allow time for answers and questions at the end. So this presentation is not going to last 1 hour. It's really going to be last 35 to 40 minutes, which allows enough time to go through questions and answers. So who is, Schneider Electric? I kind of did a recap on the first one, but I thought it'd be interesting to kind of go through this again. As you could tell, there's a whole bunch of companies that we've acquired over the years through acquisition. That's very typical in our business these days. And Schneider Electric, really, we're a global leader in energy management and automation. with digital solutions for efficiency and sustainability. And what we are is we're really a world leader in manufacturing of energy technologies, real-time automation, software, and services for integrated solution support. And when you really look at that, what are the markets that we actually serve? It's buildings, homes, data centers, infrastructure, and industry. So really, a lot of our business, a good chunk, I'd say 60% of it is actually related to a commercial type office, where we have another 40% related to industrial, utility type information and customers associated with different data sets accordingly. So very diverse company, global, and as you can see by some of the brand names, you might be more familiar with us, with others, especially since it's a U.S. production, as Square D, Wonderware, APC. So you're going to see some of these applications and solutions that we're going to show in our live software integration. It's actually a site that we're going to connect to and actually show you what's possible with integrations between multiple, I'm going to say, divisions of a Division 25, for example, Division 23, Division 26, Division 28, and 27 for that matter. So we're actually going to show some of those features and benefits as we go through. I did want to point out we do actually have a site that you can go to called Proficient. At the bottom of this, and again, you're going to get a copy of this, there's a website you can link to this. This is not a marketing style portal. It is made directly for technical information for consulting engineers from data sheets. There's pre-recorded webinars like this one that you can get, CDU, PDHs, white papers, really the things that we get asked the most to try to find. And so this is kind of a nice location, and if you opt in with email, allow email notification, we host webinars like this throughout the year on different topics that are typically trying to be generic in nature, and you will get notifications that we will be hosting that type of session. So, just as a recap here from what is Division 25 and what is a smart building, we kind of wanted to go through just the life in the day of a smart building and what that might look like to an owner, a tenant or customer, no matter which industry you might be in. This representation is kind of like a day in the life where I pull up to a facility, for example. I use my badge to card read in. I go in, and security cameras obviously know that I'm there, that they're not going to get an alarm that someone just entered the area without unauthorized access. You might get where my car chargers, this is pretty common with businesses now, where it'll actually activate a car charger, and you can actually sync that up to your account to where you can actually pay for it and or be notified when it is done and charged. Then you have personal space where does the temperature and lights come on in the occupancy's area, whether it's a floor. That always depends on zoning. But really getting back into the personal nature of the person being there in the space. And then really we're starting to get into more things now with smart technology, smartphones, with apps and analytics, and things that you can actually control your space from your smartphone, your own device. We call it BYOD, bring your own device. We're starting to see we've got some very large commercial office building customers that actually allow their tenants to actually control their temperature and their space by individual zone, and as because of that, they actually offer higher rent than others to be able to do this. So this is a sort of a trend we're starting to see in the industry around smart technology. It might be something, though it's kind of futuristic, to think about Amazon Alexa integration, though we actually have some customers that are starting to do this in meeting rooms. I mean, I would think if you're a CEO of a very large corporation and you came into a meeting room and you actually told Alexa to turn on the lights and adjust the temperature, and you wanted to come across as a very high-tech company, I think that would be pretty amazing to do nowadays, because you don't see it very often in commercial facilities, where you might see more things like that in the home. So we're starting to see things more like empowering that in the space. Then whether it's be obviously controlling the air conditioning equipment to that individual space, per the floor, per the building, per the occupant. And then it might be the facility manager. He's going to get a report that tells him, yes, this building's operating, we're all good to go. And we want to maybe look at what some of the benchmarking is to where, how is my building performing versus others in my portfolio. Security might get some notifications that, hey, the building is occupied. Floors 3, 4, and 5 are now occupied with tenants in the space. They're alerted, so they're not worried that we actually have people in the building or not. And or individual, if you will, alarm systems are deactivated into a personal space. We see this a lot with individual tenants where they might have an individual alarm system. They might be notified, so it kind of helps them with managing the facility. And then the last thing is how does the energy portfolio compare to others? What are some of the trends we're seeing in the building, and how does this data become archived? So that's really a very simplistic world of how to connect different systems and how that might benefit the end user. So as another recap, why use Division 25? It's really to link, I'm going to call it silos of specifications between 23, 26, and 28 in this case. We're going to see some examples of this. 25 was developed by the AIA architectural specification mechanism to be able to link use cases, if you will, between systems and actually get a benefit out of those. And so it really helps link the different systems together. It gives really kind of the owner of what they want. Since it's linking data between, I'm going to call it subsystems or other systems, we can actually pull that up to dashboards, sustainability reports. It gives them kind of what the look and feel of what the owner is actually going to get out of it. There is some capital typically and operational savings that could be from efficiency, that can be from not having to provide duplicate equipment, which is very common if you're not coordinating between divisions. We talked about energy sustainability, but really wellness is a new one now. There's a WELL certification that's out there that we are actually part of one of the very first projects in New York City that was WELL Building certified by the WELL Building Institute, and we were part of that solution. So we're starting to see more and more around building smart, safe, and very environmentally friendly buildings for our customers. And we're actually starting to see another wave of technology kind of branching off into efficiencies. I know our own companies struggle with that when you go through and you really have a space that's being partially utilized. I know when I come up to our corporate office and it's a Friday afternoon and it's half empty. A lot of times it's a matter of, did we really need to run all that space? Did we need to manage that much space? Did we really need to have that many conference rooms? Were they being utilized? So there's a whole new group of technologies that's starting to advance in that space now, a whole lot of companies that have started up, and many more. So these are the type of things that we're seeing that kind of fall into that Division 25 that weren't your traditional buildings. So what does this look like? Maybe from a little different perspective than a smart building technology. Let's look at like maybe the core inside the building. So what I'm going to show is just a representation of what might a building look like from the inner sides of this from a technology standpoint versus a life or day in the tenant space. So we have the HVAC typically, and you could argue maybe that's the power side of this as one of the core features of a building. Then you might have a fire alarm interface, for example, and really the S's off to the side are things I'm going to actually show you in a live demo. I don't have everything on this stack, but we're going to go through a few of these to kind of give you an idea of what we will show. Lighting and blind control, and then you could have possibly power management. Really, power and HVAC controls are kind of mandatory. You're going to have that in almost any building, and it's just a matter of how much do you want to link and share data between them. Access control, most buildings have that nowadays. It's a pretty much given. How much you link it together to provide other value to your facilities and owners is up to you. And then you have smart grid, which we're not going to actually show, though we do have sites that are on site that we have that we could actually show that. Building occupancy is kind of what we're talking about with the next wave of what's happening in the technology space, and then apps and analytics. A lot of stuff nowadays is being done in the cloud because of the horsepower and really limitless connectivity by clients across the world. So that's starting to become a bigger deal with automations. But this is kind of what I wanted to show, and I wanted to link what I showed in part 1 back to this part 2, which is really going into the software demo. So what I'm going to do is make an attempt here to jump into a live demo, and I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share. And if this technology works, you are going to be able to see my desktop. And Kevin, please remind me if you do not see it, but you should be able to see my desktop at this point. So while this is coming up, I've actually saved this as one of my favorites on my desktop. I'm actually logging into our actual software. Again, this is always a little tricky when you do it live, but I'm going to go ahead and log in. There's going to be a little bit of a delay. This is done. We have access to this. It's just telling you this is a demonstration, even though it's a live software package across Schneider properties. And this is really just what's possible here. Not saying that every customer would want to do all these things, but it gives you a good representation of what is possible. So what I'm looking at here is our Schneider buildings around the world. These are actually our factory offices. We have a number of factory offices. These are like our corporate offices in each location around the world. And what we're doing is we're actually looking at all of them together. These are actually our facilities, and I'm able to link these because I have permission to use our own software to look at these. I can see which ones are in alarm, which ones are healthy, which ones are unoccupied, by just clicking at the map. If I had alarms, it would pop up here. I can globally see my alarms here at the bottom that are summarized across, and I'm going to go ahead and minimize those a little bit here. And it's going to take a second to refresh. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just drill down into a building, and I'm going to go pick one of our buildings is the Hive in Paris. So let me go here, and I'm going to give it a second, and what's going to happen is, but until we have a slight delay in it updating your screen, what I'm going to show you is, and I don't know how much real time it's going to be, but I'm going to go to a security reader and simulate that this building, because right now it's grayed out, it's in a non-occupied mode, unoccupied as you can see by the status. There's no access, so this is really after hours. We've got nothing is running, power is off, and I'm just going to give you an idea. And at the top, I can do a summary of it. The HVAC, I can see power, security, lighting, and fire. I can also change I can kind of get an overview of what's happening in the space at that time. Obviously, this is overseas. This is our building in Paris. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to activate, and this would be sort of a smart technology where I'm going to go ahead and activate a reader down here at the bottom, and I'm going to wait for this to catch up here in a second. And I'm going to go ahead and activate the reader like it's in a active mode, and I'm going to do a valid card read, and I'm going to turn off the alarm system. And when I do that, without doing anything other than that, I'm going to pause for a second because you're going to see this building turn colors from a gray to an occupied level. And then what you're going to see to the left is you're going to see the building turn into an occupied level, a normal building mode. It's going to start running the air handlers, and then the power is going to start ramping up. And so I'm going to pause for a second and let you see the update between there. And then now I can just drill down into a floor from this map and go look at what a floor might look like. And so what I'm going to do as this is updating is, in its latency here, is I'm going to go ahead and show you that I have a floor plan representation of a building. And what it is it's color-coded based on temperature. Because this is our offices, we did this so we could actually show people, but I can see how far or how below set point it is from an HVAC perspective. I can hover over it, and it will actually tell me what the space of the temperature is, the set point, and so forth. Obviously, I've got some that are green, and I've got some, actually I have them all that are in red at different stages. And so depending on what the office looks like, you could actually do color codes based on temperature and so forth across this space. At this point, I can also navigate at the top for HVAC, power, security, and lighting. And I can also, since I'm in really the HVAC section, I can go to an air handler and go ahead and look like an air handler. Again, this is not really a demonstration to show what's capable on HVAC. This is really more of a demonstration of what's capable of integration between systems. As this updates with the HVAC system, I'm going to go ahead and simulate here, because we actually have this as sort of our simulation, is we're going to go ahead at the bottom and I'm going to trip a circuit breaker. Like this would be a power circuit breaker that might trip. And I can do that from here and simulate that. And it's actually going to go ahead and shut down the unit automatically, which you're going to see in a second. And then it'll actually go, I can link it right to my breakers, so I can actually go directly to my breakers, which is in the center of the screen here. I'm going to click on that. Okay, so in this case, I went ahead to the breaker, right into the power management system, and I can actually see the breaker was actually tripped without having to go into a separate software package. I could also go back to the HVAC and reset it, but again, this is really for demo. I don't ever recommend you reset a breaker remotely from that location. Well, let's see here. Maybe it is. Are you still being able to see it? Are you seeing the power on one line here?
I am.
Okay, okay.
And we've got a chat item here that says the audience can now see the demo.
Oh, good, good, good. Okay, well, I'll drill back in there then. Okay, so that was the air handler if you couldn't see it. Of course, I could go to like crack units, and for more of the data center space, I could go to boilers. I'm going to show you a little bit of a crack unit, which was really, this is more connecting back to the data center space. Maybe this runs into not only Division 26, but obviously with HVAC applications. And if I go here, again, I'm not going to get into all the details. This is not really for HVAC. But I did want to show that on Building Advisors, one of our cloud-based offers, and I can launch that directly from in here and go through it directly. Now, on a lot of our cloud-based solutions, we have a separate login that you have to go to get that to work. Obviously, that's a two-factor authentication in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and log in here and just get this going. So this is actually our cloud-based offer. So it's gone out and it's actually looked at our analytics in the cloud. Most of our stuff's on the Microsoft Azure cloud for that extra bit of fault tolerance that we have. So this is really going back to almost like a Division 25 where I'm syncing up all the data. And I've actually got some reports in here, some simultaneous heating and cooling, higher than set point of boiler efficiency. This is really a dashboard in here. And I'm actually showing like a building portfolio across all the different platforms. And this is actually one of the customers we have permission to use, which is MIT in Cambridge up there, to show them their different buildings. They've been using this for some time. But again, it was just really to give you the capabilities of what's possible. And then if I switch over to power, and Kevin, please feel free to correct me or stop me anytime in here if folks are sending you notes that they're not seeing anything.
No, I think we're good now.
Okay. So in here, I'm really showing if the latencies there is a one line, and I can actually drill down into my one lines from here. As you can see, I'm not really having to get outside the BMS to do this. We're integrating the Division 26 in this case. I'm actually able to get into server racks as well if I want to tie into the IT space and be able to get rack information, for example, possibly from a data center. I might want to look at a UPS and tying into there, though that's not too uncommon nowadays, looking at UPSs and tying into the data center space. What we kind of talked about earlier was maybe a car charger and looking at that type of environment. Nowadays, we're starting to see more and more of that. So we actually have an integration into our car chargers that you can see on here. And we have a number of these around our offices in the different locations. We actually occupy and unoccupy these with the occupancy schedule of the building. So when the building shows an unoccupied mode, we do not energize these, if you will, or allow power. During occupied mode, we allow it free for our employees. And I can drill down into different dashboards and applications on here to where I can go ahead and do energy reports and dashboards, and I'm going to launch this for us here to just give you an idea across portfolios. And as this launches, I'm going to look at where we can actually look at our offices across the portfolio that I showed between Boston, Hong Kong, London, Paris, and Singapore. And I can look at the total consumption across live data, almost like your KPIs across each. And I can look at the KWH across each portfolio and see which ones are occupied, unoccupied, and then I can actually drill down further if I wanted to into different segments of buildings, which I just drilled down into Boston, for example. And it's telling me the number of cars that were basically average partner cars that are burning that much fuel today. Obviously, we're global. I can change the metrics from this from kilometers to miles, for example. I left it in basically in the kilometer format just because of the essence of time. But I could have changed that to U.S. figures as well. And then, so that's really a lot of the power integration. And then if I get into security, and this is an example you saw already where I had the front door and I went ahead and unlocked the building, for example. I could do the same thing with a meeting room. So I can lock a meeting room, unlock a meeting room, have it turn on the lights, turn off the lights, have it occupied, unoccupied. And I can get into lighting control as well, to where I can get into actually controlling temperature in a space. And I'm going to let this kind of drill down into that integration here. And I'm showing a main office, whether the lights are completely on and overridden, or whether I want to dim them to a certain light level. I can manually go in there and do that, which I'm showing here. And as I change the color off and on, it'll actually change the color in the space from on to off, and I'll just simulate that or show you that here. Again, this is really our own offices, but we're not actually turning on and off our lights. We're setting this up to show the effect of what could be done if you allow it. And then the last one I was going to show is the fire alarm. By the way, as you saw me turn the lights on and off, you saw the color change as well, and it also changed the different shading levels as part of that. And then the fire, we get a lot of questions on fire integration. And the things I always say, there's really about 3 ways to tie into fire. We're not UL approved for life safety, though we do have a smoke control rated system. So we are UKL 864. A lot of the larger manufacturers are and have that type of integration, and that would be where we would do the smoke control, evacuation, in addition to working with the fire alarm to get alarms per floor typically or per zone. That's one type of integration. Another one is really like a fire alarm, fire trouble by just simply block contacts. And then another one I'm going to show you on here was really tying into like a fire alarm panel. A lot of the fire alarm panels are intelligent in some way, shape, or form, and I can pull that data in and actually get the alarm information as I'm showing in this display. I'm actually tying into a fire alarm panel and pulling in what faults it might have, what statuses it may have, whether it needs to have its batteries rechanged or not. So this is really showing that type of integration into there. So that was really, I really just wanted to go back to the live map and show you what is possible from a global standpoint. And if you look at it, we showed card reader integration, lighting integration, power metering and power solutions integration, data center integration. We showed apps and types of analytics in the cloud. So we showed really, if you look at that org chart or that screenshot we saw before of a target and the different levels in a building of the technology in the space, we really went through and showed a lot of that in a very high-level presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here, and what I'm going to do is back to the slide deck and go through, let's see, a conclusion here. So close this window. I think we've got to get back to the slides again here. There we go.
There we go.
Yep. So as I said before, this wasn't going to be an entire hour. I did want to show some of the features and benefits that were shown in not only part one, but also part two. So in part one, in conclusion, I just wanted to, and I know we're going to have a lot of questions, so I figure I'll allow some ample time for the questions. But in Division 25, what we did in the first part was a little bit on who is Schneider Electric, which we covered as part of this as well. Then we had trends driving connectivity, a lot more of what's happening in the trends and in the intelligent spaces that we're starting to see from owners, developers, and consultants. What is an intelligent building? And then we really got into the breakdown of the Division 25 of what it looks like, the components of it. And then we went through about 3 use cases to show what the applications are and how they connect between the different subsets of divisions. 23, if you didn't know, is the HVAC, but as a subset, there's controls. 26 is electrical, but there's also subsets of power. There's also subsets of a lighting control. When you look at 28, there's subsets of that as being security, intrusions, card access, video, and then 25 is really a matter of tying the different systems together and getting that data all to work together to be able to provide a common functionality across the different divisions in lieu of standalone information. And we went through some of those use cases. And then in part two, I wanted to show a recap of what is an intelligent building, the Division 25 specification, what is it across the different BU or different divisions, and then was the live software demo to actually show some of those actual integrations, because most folks talk about it, but they don't really show how that might look or integrate and what that might mean in the world of an intelligent building. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm assuming we have a number of questions here. Kevin, can you go ahead and start reading some of these off so I can answer them, please?
Sure, Brad. I'm more than happy to. And as you suggest, we're going to turn to our audience questions. Please, to our audience, type your questions for the presenter in the Ask a Question box. We'll get to as many as time allows. And those we don't get to, we'll post on cscmag.com. The first question I have from a listener, Brad, is what discipline or what disciplines are responsible for Division 25 drawings and specifications?
Okay, great question. Yes, we get asked that question a lot. So in working with technology to connect different subsystems, different divisions together, we get asked, well, how do I procure that? How do I go to market with that? The Division 25 was really intended to be a division that would be procured through a general contractor or directly through some type of construction manager. The idea is that would be coordinated through that type of entity on a project. Now, not every project allows for that, so it really gets back to the contracting models of what were available today. Sometimes those are available, sometimes they aren't. We've seen to where Division 23, the controls would be put completely in Division 25, and we've seen where we've tried to put 25 in Division 23 under like a mechanical contractor and try to have it coordinated that way. There's really, I think when you look at the contracting model and you look at the AIA specifications, the intent was it would go through an independent body, like a general or construction manager, independent of the mechanical, independent of the electrician, independent of your security, so that you can get all this data and actually use it in a integrated format. And then when we're starting to get into things like fault detection, analytics, and I say fault, but really HVAC fault detection, as I kind of showed, and we're starting to get into other cloud-based solutions, and even with workplace efficiency, those things really fall into categories that are really haven't been developed before. And so those would also fall back typically to that general contractor to coordinate between the different sections. So hopefully I answered that correctly.
Sure. And Brad, once you've got those drawings and specifications gathered and identified, how do you coordinate the next steps? How do you get everybody looking at the same sheet of music?
Right. Usually it's done as a coordination meeting. We highly recommend that no matter who you work with, when you're working with I'm going to call it almost like a master system integrator, Division 25, for example, type contractor that's going to integrate multiple systems, you really have to get all the parties involved. This is where you typically have the greatest opportunity for, if you will, for reducing overlapping equipment, because a lot of times we'll see that between siloed equipment, where a big example of that is power meters, where we'll see power meters added to all the gear and electrical equipment in Division 26, and yet in Division 23, they will have the same duplicate meters in both applications going to just two different systems. And there's no reason why, and nowadays with the way that switchgear and electrical distribution is completely intelligent now, there's no reason to have duplicate, in most cases, duplicate information or duplicate meters downstream when all that can be done upstream. And then, of course, if you do that, there's some huge labor savings, efficiency savings with that. But until you get all the parties together to help coordinate that, it is very difficult. And that's where having a very proactive construction management team in place and getting involved earlier in the early stages of the design instead of after it's already come out to bid is a real benefit to doing that, almost what you call an IPD, Integrated Project Delivery, which is also supported by AIA and ASHRAE. Good questions.
Good. Thanks, Brad. The next question comes from one of our attendees, and they're asking whether you see challenges and risks involved in having traditionally separate and sometimes proprietary systems share a structured cabling system.
Yes, we have seen that. That issue comes up a lot. I would say that what you really want to look for is if you're connecting subsystems together, you're connecting different manufacturers together, you're typically bringing that to some type of IP backbone. Is more common today. Ethernet is really the way of the future, not so much serial type communication, especially when you start getting into speed of being able to share all this data across the platform. And cybersecurity is a really big deal. So when you get into the risk standpoint, you want to make sure that the system at the top layer, the system collecting the data, has the highest level of cybersecurity available. There's some best practices out there that could help with that. And there's a list of items that are just really, if you really follow sort of the IEC, there's a standard in there. If you support it, it's called 62443, which goes to a cybersecurity life cycle approach. And when you look at that type of certifications, it gets into stuff with encryption. It gets into secure connections like HTTP across multiple systems, strong password protection support. Those are the kind of things you want to make sure at a master system integrator level or a integrated level at a Division 25 that you have the highest level of cybersecurity. Otherwise, you're introducing a higher level of security risk into all those subsystems you're trying to connect to. Good question.
Well, thanks, Brad. Yeah, we're getting some very detailed questions here, and I'll take the time to read them off the best I can. We much appreciate them. The next one is, can you describe for us the state of things related to common protocols? On the HVAC side, it's fairly common to have non-proprietary protocols, for example, through BACnet. Is that now happening for things like lighting control, fire alarms, and security? Also, is that now happening? Could you just answer the question that way?
Yes. We really look at it as there's two different types of open protocols when we're starting to see connectivity to systems. There's really what I would call traditional buildings. That's the BACnet, the LawnWorks, the type of open systems that are really related to HVAC. And then you get into things like maybe Modbus that's more related to meters, though BACnet's becoming more prevalent now in some meter options. And then you get into lighting. A lot of times those protocols for lighting and fire, you'll find that they'll have, in a lot of cases, a BACnet card that you can add as an option. Occasionally it's a lawn interface, a lawn card you could add, but most of the time they do have a BACnet, sort of some type of BACnet interface for those two. So we're really starting to see, really between Modbus, BACnet, and LawnWorks, those are the three prevalent in a typical building that you would see. Now, what's changing in the space is we start talking about wellness, we start talking about analytics, we start talking about integrating the building-related items. When you talk to things like when I want to talk to Alexis, for example, and Alexa, if I want to talk to that type of device, it doesn't understand BACnet or LawnWorks. When you talk to things like other IT solutions out there, and so, for example, one of our hotel solutions ties into a reservation system for a hotel. Well, the reservation system doesn't speak, in a lot of cases, Modbus, BACnet, or LawnWorks. So what we've done is, and there's other companies like this that have opened up their, what I'm going to call their API, and are able to write individual RESTful API applications into different systems that are non-buildings related to be able to share data. And as you get into specific applications, that becomes very useful to where we're taking now to that IoT space. We're taking it to a very much different level than truly just in the building. We're taking this much more to a higher level architecture with being able to connect to multiple systems. And since we've released this open API, we've had over 80 applications that have been written around unique integrations that made sense from a customer standpoint, and we put it in over 400 buildings. So this is starting to see a pretty big trend in things beyond just open within an HVAC or building space. Good question.
Good. We've got at least one more question here in terms of protocols, proprietary and non. What type of security software and or protocols does the system use to keep someone from hacking the building or stealing data?
That's a good one too. It's interesting on security, especially card access security. We get asked sometimes, we want an open security system, open protocol. And then I said, you kind of think about that and go, well, wait a minute, why would you want something open to where others could, get into it? In reality, there's some type of layer of encryption with most security systems, and then there's usually some type of secure connection between them. In our case, we actually are talking our own native language between security and automation, though we get into things like Mercury boards and other applications that we have. And Mercury is one of the #1 leading card access manufacturers of readers, or excuse me, card reader boards. And they have actually an add-on module that is BACnet related, and it actually has 64 points of data you can read and write from. So what that would mean in that case is the security system is still encrypted at its level, and it's going to share data through a BACnet interface over to the BMS to be able to share occupied, unoccupied information between them in still a safe and secure manner without having to actually have it go directly into the source code. So that would be an example of being able to do that safe and secure in that application.
Thanks, Brad. For a typical building project, how many man-hours are needed to implement the Division 25 specification requirements and perform its commissioning?
We get asked that question a lot. It's never an easy answer because there is no one answer. When you look at all the things you could possibly do to a building or connect to a building, whether it's a hospital, whether you're tying into like nurse systems or bed systems, there's no rule of thumb that says, okay, if you do this, it's this. It depends on how many use cases that you're typically connecting to and how many use cases that bring value to the owner. I will say that if you go online and you look at YouTube and you look up a building called The Edge over in Amsterdam, we were part of that project. That was one of our earlier designs of integrating to multiple platforms. The feedback I got that was actually about 10% more of a control project than typical, that what we've seen. So if you add 10% more of what you've got, then that was typically the integration piece. Now, again, I'm using that as just one example of something we had internal data for, but I have been asked that enough. Now, really, when you think about it, if you really run the numbers, and this is what always blows my mind, is there's really two core things in your building that are going to be there for a long time. Three. You've got the HVAC system, you've got the controls, and you've got power. Those things are going to be there for typically 20 to 30 years. Probably out of those three things, the ones that are the most intelligent, able to connect to almost most things, as you saw from my demo, is the controls. And I don't know if you run the numbers before, but it's typically 1 to 3% of a total construction job. It's roughly 10% of a mechanical contractor scope if it's done through 23. So if you think about that, if it's only 1 to 3%, and again, that varies depending on the complexity of it. Maybe for a hospital, it's 4% of a total construction job. Maybe it's 5%. Well, when you think about that, and you think of, well, why am I worried about 10% more of the 3%? Or 10% more of 5% of a total job, when it has probably the biggest capability to integrate two systems across multiple platforms in a building. So really the cost, there is a cost impact, obviously. I have seen that actually got offset where, in fact, I was on a hospital project we did up in Pennsylvania, to where we had so much duplicate meter information that it actually paid for the entire difference in cost on Division 25 for hiring to doing a master system integrator level of design. It actually paid for it just by simply going through and eliminating the duplications. But that's not going to say that in every case. Good question.
Good. Yeah, we're still getting a lot of questions about the various protocols involved and how open the system is, but someone here is asking more about functionality. And I'm going to ask this question. Is the software going to allow the integration of building peak demand in terms of power, or doing curtailment of certain kinds of equipment, or even reverse the flow of power from the electrical vehicle batteries back to the building system? How much room to explore is there built into the system?
Well, that's a really good question. Those are starting to come up more and more too. We're working right now on a project that I'm familiar with up in, let's just say, the Northeast area, and we're looking at similar applications where it's on-site storage of energy with our microgrid team, and we're actually looking at the car chargers and looking at the cars as almost like a battery source when you think about it for load shedding. And I say load shedding, but really more of a curtailment of energy because of the solar that they're looking at and the amount of room they are able to build. We're in the design phase now, so I don't have all the details, but those are all questions that have started to come up with how do I manage my energy with solar applications, with having my vehicles charged directly tying into my grid. I haven't seen where it goes back and forth too much with, getting into the utility companies. That's really more of our microgrid team that talks more about that, gets into more of those discussions. From the control standpoint, we tie into our microgrid solution. So the things that from an HVAC standpoint, usually from this audience out here of our typical audience, is we're related more to the building side of it, the HVAC, the power loads sort of downstream. So the things that we can do is we can do things like fast load shedding to where if we did have a curtailment that we had to meet, we typically don't shut off loads unless it's non-critical loads. But what you could do is change set point temperatures a few degrees in non-critical areas, turn off non-essential lighting if that's possible. But those are the things we could affect downstream of the electrical system versus upstream, where more the microgrid folks are working more with dealing with things like the utility grid and so forth.
Good. Question, does the system work in terms of occupant requests or what occupants' behavior is? For example, if someone was overshooting the energy management building profiles through either excessive heating or cooling, would that come to the attention of the building managers through this system so that they might be able to do something about it?
So if it's set up that way from the beginning, or the owner has requested, or the specification has outlined it that way, yes, the capability is there. Typically what you'll see is a couple different variations. One is if you're allowing tenant comfort and individual control, you typically limit them. The systems nowadays are typically intelligent enough to where even though I may tell the thermostat, for example, or my smartphone that I want it colder, in reality, I'm going to go, as an owner or a facility manager, I'm only going to let them change the temperature plus or minus whatever I give them, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4. Maybe that's different for a meeting room versus their own office. Meeting rooms is where you get a lot of complaint calls. People are hot, people are cold, so you might want to give them a little more flexibility in meeting rooms. But those are the kind of things you can set up, and then if you limit it and you leave it wide open, and you don't set a limit, then yeah, you could actually set an alarm that if they do it over a certain temperature, it would report back. So those are very easy to do within controls.
Good. One of our attendees is saying that it's their impression that most owners won't understand the possibilities of the integration, and then they don't know what potential problems it can solve, or what the value or return on investment of the system is going to be. What do you find, as someone who interacts with all the interested parties, is most convincing to them in terms of buying into the concept?
Yes, that is the challenge. That's why Division 25 hasn't been used as much. It's kind of not been understood. Typically what we've done is we've developed use cases that actually shows the owner what the benefit would be, literally in writing. These are the things you would get, and these are I'm going to say the KPIs that might mean something to you. So it really is a matter of understanding what the owner is really looking for out of a building, whether it's around their key KPIs, and I say KPIs, but key performance indicators. What are some of their goals? Is it around wellness? Is it around, keeping folks happy in their space? productive. You know, there's a whole big study out there that Jones Lang LaSalle did around the 1990 or 330, 300, where you really, and you look at productivity being the biggest piece of a company's investment versus worrying about energy, even though energy is important. But if you look at their studies being done by CABA, had a really nice study they did up in Canada with hundreds of buildings that actually proved that they actually showed intelligent buildings reduced the amount of absentees that are in a space by their tenants or their customers. And so they did a really nice report, one of the best I've seen, with one of the longest researches about the benefits or return on investment with people productivity and people being, more, I'm going to say less absent, if you will, more or less sick days. And they did a really good job of that. So if you equate that back to return on investment and productivity, you can see the number starts to jump up pretty extreme.
Well, thanks, Brad. I think I've got one more question for you today, and that is the majority of our questions that we've gotten from the audience have been about the need for an open systems, and on the other hand, the need for secure systems. Can you talk about the evolution? Are there still challenges that you foresee in terms of integration of these types of systems when you talk about 80 different applications or more? And are there any questions or issues on the security side of it that you think are going to evolve further as time goes on?
Well, in the essence of 3 more minutes left on the call, there's no way we can answer those. They're both unique challenges to any organization. Cybersecurity and security is a big one. And again, that's a whole. If you didn't know, let's put it this way: if you log into our portal, that was the Proficient portal, there are webinars that we pre-recorded. Okay, so if you go there, there's a pre-recorded webinar on cybersecurity. That's an hour long, and there's a pre-recorded webinar on BACnet as one protocol, and I believe we've covered other protocols, and both of those are an hour discussion of each. So one's protocols, the other one is about cybersecurity. So if they log in and register in our Proficient portal, they can go to all kinds of details, and again, it's product agnostic. It's made just for educational purposes, and they can go in and look at all the details. And then there's also a section in there if they want to have my team help, they can request help from us. And I've got a team of 6 solution architects plus myself that help do nothing but technical support for applications just like that, and can handle and answer a lot more questions around those 2 subjects.
Well, thanks a lot, Brad, for bringing your expertise here to share with us today. And I want to thank the audience for the great questions. I'd also like to extend a special thanks to our sponsor, Schneider Electric, for sponsoring today's event. And now that we're just about done, we want to hear how we did. The exit survey will pop up on your screen as soon as the webcast ends. Please take a moment to complete it because we use this information to improve our webcasts. Finally, on behalf of Consulting Specifying Engineer and CFE Media and Technology, I'd like to thank you all for attending. This concludes our webcast, and we'll see you next time.